My name is Thomas Mercer. I've rewritten this opening 1,000 times in my mind, searching for words that wouldn't sound like madness to those who haven't seen what I've seen. For months now, I've carried this vision like a stone upon my chest, crushing me with its weight, with the responsibility of knowing what's to come while others sleep peacefully in their ignorance. 3 months ago, I died for 6 minutes and 17 seconds on an operating table in Bethesda Naval Hospital. The doctors called it clinical death, a massive coronary that stopped my heart completely. But where they saw darkness, I witnessed revelation. In that sacred space between worlds, where the veil between life and death grows thin, I was not alone. Jesus Christ himself stood before me, not as a gentle shepherd of Sunday school paintings, but as the Lion of Judah, his eyes filled with both infinite compassion and terrible knowing. He took my hand without speaking. Suddenly, we were suspended above the Atlantic Ocean, watching the waters that have cradled America since its birth. The sea began to tremble beneath us. The floor of the ocean cracked and shifted, and I felt his grip tighten as the waters pulled back on the shore in an unnatural retreat. "Watch," he whispered, his voice both within me and around me. "Watch what comes." The wave that formed defies earthly description. A mountain of water, impossibly tall, gathering strength as it raced toward the eastern seaboard. I saw cities I recognized: Boston, New York, Washington, Charleston, Miami, continuing in blissful unawareness as destruction approached. I saw the precise moment when awareness turned to terror. Too late for escape. "This is what approach is," he said, tears streaming down his face. "This is what they must be warned of." I begged him then, begged to be shown another way, another future. "Must this happen, Lord? Can it not be prevented?" His answer burns within me still. The foundations have already been shaken. The waters are already gathering. But those who heed the warning may yet find higher ground. Every night since, I wake at exactly 3:17 a.m., drenched in sweat, the taste of salt water in my mouth, hearing his final command. "Tell them what you've seen. Tell them why it comes. Tell them how to prepare their souls." I've lost friends for speaking this truth. My own family thinks grief has broken my mind. My pastor suggested therapy when I approached him with trembling hands and this testimony on my lips. The weight of carrying this message alone has nearly crushed me. But tonight, I break my silence completely, not from pride or delusion, but from sacred obedience, because I made a vow in that space between worlds. If he let me return to my body, I would testify to what I had witnessed, no matter the personal cost. The waters are gathering. The foundations are trembling. Time is shorter than they know. This is not a message I wanted. This is a warning I've been commanded to give. Before all of this began, I lived in Seabrook Harbor, a small coastal town 30 miles north of Portsmouth. You'd find it beautiful. One of those places where the Atlantic has shaped every aspect of life for generations. My grandfather was a fisherman, as was his father before him, though I chose a different path. 26 years in the Navy, followed by a career teaching maritime history at the community college. The sea remained my constant companion. My home stood on Bay Ridge Road, a modest Cape Cod with weathered gray shingles and a widow's walk where I'd spend evenings watching the horizon. From there, I could see the stretch of rocky shoreline that defined our town, the working harbor with its fishing boats, and the endless expanse of the Atlantic. Sometimes benevolent, sometimes terrifying, always mysterious. Each morning followed the same pattern. I'd wake before sunrise, make strong black coffee in the same chip mug I've had since my service days, and walk the half-mile to Hampton Point. There's a particular rock formation there, locals call the Sentinel, where I'd sit and watch the dawn break over the water. 20 years of this ritual, through summer fog and winter gales. The constancy of it anchored me after my wife Sarah passed. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Routine sustained me. Monday through Thursday teaching at the college. Friday afternoons volunteering at the Maritime Museum. Sunday mornings at First Baptist, where I'd sat in the same pew since childhood. Evenings spent reading on my porch, nodding to neighbors as they walk their dogs. The kind of predictable existence that feels secure, immutable. But 3 months before my experience, things began to change. Subtle at first, so subtle I questioned my own perceptions. It started with the dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but visitations that left me shaken. In them, I stood on Hampton Point as the tide pulled back, farther than I'd ever witnessed in 70 years of watching these waters. The exposed seabed stretched for miles, shells, rocks, and secrets long submerged suddenly revealed. In the dream, I always walked out onto this forbidden ground, drawn by some invisible force, knowing I shouldn't, knowing the water will return with vengeance. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. I'd wake from these dreams with my heart pounding, sheets soaked with sweat, the taste of salt on my lips though I lived a half-mile from shore. For weeks, I told no one. What was there to tell? That an old man was having bad dreams? That I suddenly found myself pausing mid-lecture about the Great Atlantic Hurricane of 1944. Forgetting what I was saying as I stared at classroom maps of the eastern seaboard, there were other signs I dismissed. The unusual behavior of shorebirds at winter, entire flocks of sanderlings and plovers abandoning their usual feeding grounds weeks before migration season. The record-breaking king tides that flooded coastal roads during otherwise normal weather. The strange calm that settled over the fishing grounds, leading the fleet to return with half-empty holds day after day. Something's changed out there, Captain Reynolds told me at the harbor coffee shop one morning. Fish are moving different. Water feels different too. Warmer in places it shouldn't be, colder in others. He'd been working these waters for 50 years, and I'd never heard uncertainty in his voice before. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. I began spending more time on my widow's walk, watching the horizon with a sailor's eye. Though I couldn't articulate what I was looking for, something within me was waiting, watching. I found myself studying tide charts, tracking subtle changes in the nearshore currents, reading reports from oceanographic institutes about shifts in the Gulf Stream. My dining room table disappeared beneath nautical maps and printouts of seismic activity in the North Atlantic. Sarah would have known something was wrong. She always sensed my disquiet before I could name it myself. But she's been gone 7 years now, and in her absence, I'd become practiced at keeping my concerns private, locked behind the weathered exterior everyone in town knew was steady, reliable Thomas Mercer. 2 weeks before my heart attack, I began giving away books, maritime histories I collected over decades. I repainted the porch though it didn't need it. I wrote letters to my son in Colorado and my daughter in Virginia. Nothing alarming, just reflections on what their childhoods had meant to me. Something in me knew a boundary was approaching, though I couldn't have named it then. The Sunday before it happened was unusually warm for March. The congregation at First Baptist seemed restless, shifting in their seats as Pastor Williams spoke about Jonah and the whale, a sermon I'd heard countless times before. But that morning, certain phrases landed differently. Jonah ran from his appointed task, Pastor Williams said. He fled across the waters, thinking distance could separate him from divine purpose. I felt a chill despite the warmth of the sanctuary. The words echoed strangely, as if spoken directly to me across the wooden pews and familiar faces. That afternoon, I climbed my widow's walk and stood watching the Atlantic until sunset, feeling its pull like never before. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. The final day, before everything changed, dawned clear and calm. I remember everything about it with preternatural clarity, as if my senses were already heightening in preparation for what was to come. The coffee tasted sharper. The morning air on my walk to Hampton Point carried scents of seaweed, and distant rain though the sky remained cloudless. Gulls wheeled overhead in unusual patterns, their cries seeming to form words just beyond my comprehension. At the college, I dismissed my maritime disasters class 20 minutes early, something I had never done before. As students packed up, I found myself saying, "Remember, the ocean gives warnings before it strikes. The question isn't whether we receive them, It's whether we're paying attention. That evening, I called both my children, conversations that felt strangely final, though we spoke of ordinary things. I organized my desk, paid bills that weren't yet due. I pulled out the box containing Sarah's letters and read them by lamplight until midnight, then placed them carefully in order within a waterproof container. Before bed, I stood one last time on my widow's walk. The night was moonless, the water of vast darkness stretching to the horizon. Yet somewhere out there, I sensed movement, something gathering, something approaching. Not yet visible, but already in motion. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. I went to sleep that night with an inexplicable certainty. By the next nightfall, everything would be different. The Thomas Mercer who had lived 7 decades of predictable days would cease to exist. I didn't know how this transformation would come, only that it was as inevitable as a tide. The last thought I remember before drifting to sleep was oddly peaceful. Perhaps at last, I would understand what the waters have been trying to tell me all these years. I couldn't have imagined that understanding would come through death itself, that my heart would stop at precisely 10:43 the next morning during a routine physical examination, that I would be rushed to Bethesda Naval Hospital, where military doctors would pronounce me clinically dead for 6 minutes and 17 seconds. 6 minutes and 17 seconds during which the veil between worlds would part, and I would be shown what the waters had known all along. I remember that morning with painful clarity. A routine physical examination at the VA clinic, something I'd scheduled months before and nearly forgotten. Nothing remarkable about it. The young doctor with steady hands, the antiseptic smell of the examination room, the faded nautical print on the wall that I studied while answering questions about my diet, my exercise habits, my family history of heart disease. Also mundane, also deceptively ordinary. "Deep breath in, Mr. Mercer," the doctor said, pressing the cold stethoscope against my chest. I inhaled as instructed, feeling a strange resistance, as if my lungs had forgotten their purpose. Then came the pressure, not gradual, but sudden and absolute, like the crushing depth of the ocean at 1,000 fathoms. My chest constricted with such violent force that I couldn't even cry out. The pain radiated outward, down my left arm, up into my jaw, a burning network of agony that seemed to map the very boundaries of my existence. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. The room tilted sideways. The doctor's face blurred, his voice stretching like taffy as he called for assistance. I remember trying to speak, to tell him about the dreams, about the warnings I'd ignored, but my mouth would no longer obey. I was a sailor caught in a storm without rudder or sail, powerless against forces greater than myself. Time fragmented, a moment of darkness, then fluorescent lights sliding past overhead, the ceiling of a hallway, urgent voices, the cold metal of a gurney beneath me. Each breath became a deliberate act of will, each heartbeat a negotiation with forces intent on claiming me. 70-year-old male, massive cardiac event in progress. BP dropping 90/60. Start 2 large-bore IVs. Call ahead to Bethesda, they're 8 minutes out. I felt myself being lifted into the ambulance, the siren a distant wail that seemed to come from another world entirely. The paramedic leaned over me, her face young but eyes ancient, placing electrodes on my chest. Behind her, through the ambulance windows, I caught a glimpse of the ocean, my constant companion now watching from a distance as I fought this most intimate battle. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Inside my chest, a war raged, each heartbeat more labored than the last. The pain transcended itself, becoming something almost luminous in its intensity. I'd known sailors who'd been taken by the sea, who described the strange peace that comes when the lungs finally surrender to the water. This was different, violent, insistent, demanding my complete attention even as consciousness began to slip away. The paramedic's voice, "Mr. Mercer, stay with us. Can you hear me?" I could, but from an increasing distance, as if her words had to travel across some vast expanse to reach me. The ambulance swayed and rocked, a vessel on troubled waters. The oxygen mask over my face fogged with each struggling breath. The beeping of the cardiac monitor grew erratic, then insistent. Its rhythm a countdown I understood instinctively. Through it all, a strange clarity began to emerge. The fear receded, replaced by a certainty I'd never known before. This was appointed. This was necessary. This was the threshold I'd been approaching all along without knowing its name. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. We arrived at Bethesda Naval Hospital, a place I knew well from my years of service. The same hallways I'd walked as a young officer now passed above me in a blur of motion and urgency. The trauma team surrounded the gurney, moving with practiced efficiency. A doctor I didn't recognize shouted orders. Nurses responded with mechanical precision. I was a vessel they were attempting to salvage, though I alone knew the tide was already turning. The pain began to transmute into something else, a pressure not just within my chest but around my entire being, as if I were descending into ocean depths for which my body was not designed. The lights of the trauma bay seemed to intensify, then diffuse. Faces became less distinct, voices more distant. The monitor's beeping slowed, each tone stretched and warped. We're losing him. Charged to 300. Clear. The shock of the defibrillator arched my back, a lightning strike across my chest. For one suspended moment, all pain ceased. Then it returned threefold, a tsunami of agony that broke against the shores of my consciousness. 3 more times they tried to restart my heart with electricity. 3 more times my body convulsed in response. But with each attempt, I felt myself slipping further away from their reach. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Then came the strangest sensation of all, a doubling of perception. I remained on the table, beneath their working hands, feeling each compression of my chest, each needle in my arm. Yet simultaneously I rose, not metaphorically, but in some essential way that defies earthly language. I ascended until I hovered near the ceiling of the trauma bay, looking down upon the scene with perfect clarity and detachment. I saw myself gray-faced, eyes closed, chest exposed where they cut away my shirt. I saw the doctor performing compressions, sweat beading on his forehead despite the room's chill. I saw the nurse counting the seconds aloud, another preparing a syringe of medication. I saw the flat green line on the monitor that signified my heart surrender. Most strangely of all, I saw this scene not with horror or fear, but with profound compassion for my broken body, for these dedicated strangers fighting to preserve a life already departing. From this vantage point, I noticed details invisible from below. The crucifix around one nurse's neck, the wedding band on the doctor's finger, worn thin with years, the clock on the wall marking the exact moment, 10:43 a.m., the calendar beside it showing the date that should have been just another Wednesday in March. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. I felt no pain now, no constriction, no desperate struggle for breath. Instead, a lightness permeated my being, a freedom I'd only glimpsed in dreams. Below, they continued their efforts with increasing urgency. The doctor barked orders. Someone called for additional medication. The compressions continued, mechanical, rhythmic, like waves against a shoreline. Time of arrest? 10:43. We're at 4 minutes now. Continue compressions. I understood then that I was witnessing my own death, not as an end, but as a passage. The body below was a vessel I'd inhabited for 70 years, now emptied of its essential cargo. Yet I remained witnessing, aware, more fully present than I'd ever been in life. A new sensation began, a gentle but insistent pull away from the scene below. Not upward exactly, but outward, towards something vast and welcoming. I felt myself begin to yield to it, like a sailor finally surrendering to currents too powerful to resist. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. As I turned toward this current, a final glance below showed the monitor suddenly registering activity, a faint, irregular heartbeat. The medical team responded with renewed effort, but I was already passing beyond their reach, drawn into a profound darkness that was neither frightening nor cold, but enveloping and alive with purpose. The last human voice I heard came from somewhere below, fading into immeasurable distance. "We've got a rhythm. Faint, but it's there." Then silence, complete and absolute. The darkness deepened, then gradually transformed, not into light, not yet, but into a different quality of darkness. Like the ocean depths where no sunlight penetrates, yet life continues in forms unimaginable to surface dwellers. I moved through this darkness without fear, carried by forces I could neither see nor resist. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Time ceased to exist as I had known it. I cannot say whether what followed took seconds or centuries. In that sacred darkness, such measurements lost all meaning. I knew only movement, purpose, and a growing awareness that I was not alone in these depths. Someone awaited me on the other side of this passage. The darkness began to thin, not dissipating but transforming once again, not into the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital room, but into something altogether different, a luminosity that seemed to emanate from the very fabric of existence itself. And within this luminosity, I began to discern a shore unlike any I'd known in life, marking the boundary between the waters that had carried me and what lay beyond. I was between worlds now, no longer bound to body I'd left behind, not yet arrived at whatever awaited me. In this liminal space, the sacred threshold, I surrendered completely to the current that had claimed me, knowing only that I was being carried exactly where I needed to go. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. And it was here, in this space between heartbeats, in these 6 minutes and 17 seconds of clinical death, that I would receive the vision that would forever alter not just my life, but the understanding of what approaches us all, a truth too terrible and too beautiful to remain unspoken. The luminosity intensified, resolving itself into what I can only describe as a corridor of light. Though light feels inadequate, like calling the ocean merely water. This was light that possessed consciousness, light that knew me, light that had been waiting for my arrival since before my birth. It enveloped me not as illumination but as recognition, as homecoming. I moved through this corridor without walking, drawn forward by something beyond gravity or time. The sensation resembled nothing from earthly experience, not flying, not swimming, not falling. Perhaps it was closest to being carried by a current too powerful to resist, yet one that cradled rather than consumed. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. As I traveled deeper, the very nature of perception transformed. I no longer observed with eyes or heard with ears, but experienced the totality of my being, a being no longer constrained by flesh or bone or the singular perspective of human senses. Colors existed that have no names in our languages, sounds beyond the spectrum of earthly hearing, textures that could only be perceived by consciousness itself. Most remarkable was the absolute absence of fear. For 70 years, I had carried the sailor's healthy respect for death, the knowledge that the sea gives and takes with equal indifference. Yet here, in this passage that should have been terrifying, I found only a profound peace, an absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The corridor opened into vastness beyond comprehension, a realm that seemed simultaneously intimate and infinite. Imagine standing on the shore of an endless ocean under an endless sky, yet feeling not insignificant but integral, not lost but found. The closest earthly comparison might be those rare, perfect moments at sea when the boundary between water and air dissolves in mist and all elements exist in harmony. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Time had no meaning here. What might have been moments or millennia passed as I adjusted to this new reality. Gradually, I became aware that I was not alone. Other presences surrounded me, not physical forms as we understand them, but distinct consciousnesses, each radiating its own unique signature of light and knowing. Some felt familiar, carrying the essence of souls I had known and loved in life. My wife, Sarah, most distinctly, her presence unmistakable though transformed, more fully herself than she had ever been able to be within constraints of her physical form. She did not speak, nor did I, yet we communicated with perfect understanding, exchanging in an instant what would have required years of conversation in the realm I had left behind. Other presences were unknown to me, yet not foreign. Souls connected to mine through lineages both physical and spiritual. Among them were ancestors who had also lived by the sea, who had watched the same waters I had watched, who had carried the same knowing I had carried. Their collective wisdom surrounded me like an atmosphere, accessible not through words but through direct transmission of understanding. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Most remarkable was the sensation of being fully known, not just my actions or thoughts, but the entire tapestry of my existence. Every moment of courage and cowardice, kindness and cruelty, faith and doubt. All was seen, all was understood. Nothing was hidden or could be hidden. Yet this complete transparency brought not shame, but liberation. Here was perfect truth without judgment, perfect understanding without condemnation. The realm itself seemed alive with consciousness, not separate entities inhabiting a space, but the space itself imbued with awareness, responsive to thought and feeling. The very atmosphere pulsed with what I can only call love, though that word too feels hopelessly inadequate. This was love as fundamental force. Love as the very fabric of reality. Love as the medium in which all existence floats. I understood then what mystics and prophets have struggled to articulate throughout human history, that we are not merely physical beings having occasional spiritual experiences, but spiritual beings temporarily housed in physical forms. The realm I now experienced was not alien territory but home, not an afterlife but the primary life, of which earthly existence is but a shadow and reflection. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Had this been the entirety of my experience, this reunion, this remembering, this return to a more fundamental reality, it would have been enough to transform my understanding forever. But even as I began to acclimate to this new mode of being, I sensed another shift approaching, another deepening, another revelation yet to come. The countless souls surrounding me seemed to draw back slightly, creating not distance but space, as if in preparation for something or someone. The very atmosphere of love intensified, concentrated, focused itself like sunlight through a lens. Though I had no physical body to respond, I felt the equivalent of breath catching, of heart quickening, of standing at attention in the presence of authority, both absolute and benevolent. In that moment of anticipation, I understood that everything, my life, my death, this journey beyond the veil, had been leading to what was about to occur. I was not a random visitor who had stumbled into this realm by accident of cardiac failure. I had been summoned, expected, awaited. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. And then, within the vastness, a presence began to coalesce. A presence so profound, so fundamental to nature reality itself, that even in this realm of expanded perception, I could scarcely comprehend it. This was not merely another soul, however exalted. This was the source from which all souls, all waters, all worlds emerge. In that moment, suspended between understanding and awe, I knew I stood at the threshold of an encounter that would forever alter not just my own existence, but potentially the lives of countless others. For what I was about to be shown was not meant for me alone. The presence coalesced, gathering light and consciousness into a form both human and divine. No artist's rendering, no stained glass window, no theological description could have prepared me for this reality. Here was Jesus Christ, not as symbol or abstraction, but as living truth, more solid and real than anything I had known in 70 years of physical existence. His countenance held both the gentle compassion depicted in countless paintings and something far more, an authority that commanded not through force but through the absolute nature of being itself. His eyes contained galaxies of understanding, oceans of sorrow, and a love so concentrated it would have incinerated my physical form had I still possessed one. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. He did not speak as we understand speech. Rather, communication flowed between us like current between shores, direct, immediate, and complete. In an instant, I knew him and he knew me, not the superficial knowing of acquaintance or even the deeper knowing of human intimacy, but knowing that encompassed the entirety of my existence, past, present, future, and dimensions beyond temporal constraints. In his presence, the narrative of my life unfolded like a tapestry viewed from above. Not as a linear progression of events, but as an integrated whole, each moment connected to every other, each choice revealing its full significance. I saw my years at sea not merely as career, but as preparation. I saw my study of tides and currents not merely as professional interest, but as groundwork. I saw my quiet life in Seabrook Harbor not merely as retirement, but as positioning. Everything, every seemingly random circumstance, every apparent coincidence had been leading to this moment, this encounter, this commissioning. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Without words, he showed me that I had been chosen long before my birth for this specific purpose, not from any special virtue or merit of my own, but because a particular constellation of my experiences, knowledge, and character made me a suitable vessel for the message that must now be delivered. The revelation brought neither pride nor fear, but profound humility. The recognition that I was being incorporated into something vastly larger than myself, a divine purpose unfolding across centuries, across dimensions, across the very fabric of creation itself. As this understanding permeated my consciousness, Jesus extended what I can only describe as his hand, though the gesture transcended physical form. In that moment of contact, I experienced a communion beyond description, a transfer of knowing so complete that it rewrote the very structure of my awareness. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Suddenly, we were moving, not through space as I had known it, but through layers of reality. The realm of pure spirit gave way to something between worlds. Beneath us, I recognized the Atlantic Ocean, though seen from perspective impossible for human eyes. I could perceive the massive tectonic plates beneath its surface, the ancient currents flowing through its depths, the accumulated memories held within its waters. Jesus directed my attention to specific features, a fault line long dormant but now shifting with ominous purpose, a subtle change in deep water temperatures, a reconfiguration of pressures building toward inevitable release. Through his perception, I understood what these signs portended with a clarity no scientific instrument could provide. The vision expanded, encompassing the entire eastern seaboard of the United States, from Maine to Florida, every harbor, every coastal city, every barrier island. Time accelerated, and I witnessed what is coming. The initial tremor deep beneath the ocean floor, the displacement of unimaginable volumes of water, the deceptive receding of shorelines that will precede catastrophe. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Then, with terrible clarity, I saw the wave, a mountain of water beyond human comprehension, gathering momentum as it races toward land. I saw it strike with apocalyptic force. Buildings collapsing, infrastructure failing, countless lives swept away in moments, not in some distant future, but soon, not as possibility, but as certainty. The vision was unbearable, yet I could not turn away. This was why I had been brought here, why I had been allowed to die temporarily, why I was being shown what no living eye could see. The understanding came not as words, but as absolute knowing. I was being commissioned as witness and warner. My death had been the necessary doorway to this revelation, and my return, if return was granted, would be for one purpose only, to testify to what I had seen. In that moment of commissioning, Jesus impressed upon me not just the warning itself, but the sacred obligation to deliver it regardless of personal cost, regardless of ridicule or rejection, regardless of whether anyone would believe. The responsibility settled upon me not as burden, but as privilege, though I understood it would become both. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. And with that understanding came another, equally profound. This disaster, though physically inevitable given the forces now in motion, contained within it a spiritual purpose, a call to awakening that transcended the material destruction it would bring. What I was being shown was not merely a natural catastrophe, but a divine intervention in human history, a terrible mercy, a necessary disruption of complacency. The vision expanded in scope and detail, as if we were witnessing creation itself from outside time. Jesus guided my perception along the entire Atlantic coastline, from the rocky shores of Maine to the sandy beaches of Florida. I saw each harbor town, each coastal city, each barrier island with impossible clarity. Not just their physical structures, but their spiritual composition, the accumulated weight of human choices, beliefs, and actions that had shaped them over generations. Then the vision narrowed, focusing on the deep Atlantic, far beyond where human eyes could see. Jesus revealed the tectonic plates beneath the ocean floor, ancient boundaries in the Earth's crust that had remained stable for centuries. I watched as pressure built along a particular fault line, energy accumulating like a divine inhalation held too long. The sea floor buckled subtly, a movement imperceptible to most sensitive instruments, yet profound in its implications. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. With terrible precision, I witnessed the birth of catastrophe, the sudden, violent release of energy as these massive plates shifted against each other, not in some hypothetical future, but in a moment already appointed, already written into the fabric of coming days. The resulting earthquake would register at a magnitude beyond what the eastern seaboard has experienced in recorded history, but was what followed that seared itself into my consciousness. The displacement of water, billions of tons suddenly thrust upward, then responding to gravity's call. The formation of a wave unlike anything most Americans have ever imagined possible on their protected shores. Not a wind-driven surge, but a tsunami born of geological violence, gathering height and momentum as it races toward land. Jesus showed me its path and impact with merciless clarity. The wave would strike first in the Carolinas with apocalyptic force, its height magnified by the continental shelf. Charleston would be among the first major cities overwhelmed. Then the wave would sweep northward, following the coastline, inundating Norfolk, the Chesapeake Bay, Washington, D.C.'s river harbors, Baltimore, Philadelphia, the entire New Jersey shore, New York harbor. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. The devastation unfolded before me in excruciating detail. Bridges collapsing, skyscrapers undermined, power grids failing, nuclear facilities compromised. Millions caught in the water's path, most with no warning or only moments to respond. The wave would penetrate miles inland along river systems, carrying the ocean's judgment into places that had considered themselves safely removed from its power. But most harrowing was not the physical destruction, vast though it was. Jesus revealed something deeper, the spiritual significance encoded within this coming cataclysm. This was not random disaster, not meaningless suffering. The tsunami represented divine intervention in a nation that had grown deaf to gentler calls. With perfect understanding, I perceived America's spiritual condition as Jesus sees it, not through political or denominational lenses, but through the perfect vision of divine love. I saw a nation of unprecedented blessing that had turned those blessings into idols, a people who spoke of God while worshiping comfort, distraction, division, and self, churches that had exchanged prophetic witness for cultural relevance, eternal truth for temporary influence. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. The tsunami would be both judgment and mercy, a terrible act of love from a father who would rather shake his children awake than let them slumber into eternal separation. In the catastrophe's aftermath, I saw what few would recognize, a window of spiritual awakening, a brief season when hearts would be receptive as they had not been for generations. When the illusion of material security is stripped away, eternal questions resurface with inescapable urgency. Jesus impressed upon me the time remaining, not in exact days or hours, but in spiritual seasons. I understood that certain signs would precede the event. Unusual seismic activity in places normally stable, inexplicable changes in deep ocean temperatures, animals responding to frequencies humans cannot perceive, those with eyes to see would notice Atlantic fishing grounds becoming suddenly barren, migratory birds altering their patterns, whales and dolphins abandoning traditional routes. Most specifically, I was shown that the disaster would be preceded by 3 smaller events that most would dismiss: a minor earthquake in a region of the South not known for such activity, an unexplained fish die-off along certain beaches, and a brief, anomalous receding of tides beyond normal patterns. These signs would occur within months of the Great Wave, serving as final warnings for those attentive to the Earth's language. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. The sequence burned itself into my consciousness. First a deep tremor, then an eerie stillness, as if the ocean itself were holding its breath. Coastal waters would inexplicably recede, drawing back farther than any normal tide, the ocean gathering itself for the coming assault. Many would be drawn to the spectacle, walking out onto suddenly exposed seabeds, unaware they were witnessing their final moments. Then the horizon would darken with the approaching wall of water, too late for escape for all but the most immediately responsive. All of this I received not as speculation or possibility, but as certain knowledge, a burden of foresight that would forever separate me from the comfortable ignorance of those who have not seen. But then, as if turning a page in creation's book, Jesus showed me what would follow the devastation. Not immediately, but in the weeks and months after the waters receded. This vision pierced me even more deeply than catastrophe itself, for it revealed purpose within pain, meaning within seeming chaos. I witnessed the landscape of the eastern seaboard transformed, physically altered beyond recognition in many places, with landmarks swept away and coastlines redrawn. But it was a human landscape that had undergone the most profound transformation. In communities that had lost everything material, I saw something precious emerging from the mud and debris, the rebirth of authentic connection, of genuine community, of souls stripped of pretense. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. In the absence of functioning infrastructure, neighbors who had lived as strangers for decades found themselves gathering around communal fires, sharing whatever resources remained, discovering the sacred art of seeing one another truly for perhaps the first time. Without screens to distract or walls to divide, human beings remembered how to be present, how to listen, how to serve. Churches that stood half empty became centers not just of physical relief, but of spiritual renewal. Denominations that had spent generations defining their differences found those theological boundaries washed away with the floodwaters. I saw pastors and priests, rabbis and imams standing together, leading communities in prayer that transcended doctrinal divisions, prayer born of genuine need rather than religious obligation. The material priorities that had dominated American life were clarified in an instant by their absence. When survival depends on water, food, and shelter, the illusion of needing the latest technology, the largest home, the most prestigious position simply dissolves. In this clarification, souls awaken to what they had always known but forgotten. That meaning is found in relationship, in service, in connection to something greater than oneself. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Most remarkable was the quality of presence I witnessed in these survivors' eyes, a depth and authenticity rarely seen in modern America. Having faced death so directly, having lost external identities upon which they had built their lives, they emerged with fierce appreciation for the gift of existence itself. Each sunrise became cause for wonder, each human encounter an opportunity for genuine communion. But the awakening did not remain confined to devastated regions. Jesus showed me how the ripples of transformation would spread across the nation, carried by media images certainly, but more powerfully through a spiritual resonance that transcended physical proximity. Americans watching from the safety of intact communities would find themselves confronted not just with the suffering of their countrymen, but with the hollow nature of their own existence. I saw living rooms where families sat stunned before screens showing catastrophe, something breaking open within them. Questions rising that no purchase, no distraction, no ideology could answer. What matters? What endures? What have we become? What were we meant to be? The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Within this national soul-searching, Jesus revealed the deeper divine purpose. The tsunami would accomplish in moments what decades of gradual decline had failed to provoke, a collective recognition that America had wandered far from both its founding principles and its spiritual foundations. Not through intellectual argument, but through visceral experience, millions would suddenly perceive the bankruptcy of a culture built on consumption, division, and self-worship. I saw a revival breaking out in unexpected places, not just in traditional religious settings, but in school gymnasiums serving as shelters, in corporate boardrooms where executives questioned the meaning of their enterprises, in suburban communities suddenly receiving displaced survivors. The awakening would transcend conventional religious expression, though it would be deeply spiritual in nature, a return to eternal truths about human purpose and divine reality. Most specifically, Jesus showed me new leadership emerging, not from centers of existing power, but from among those who had lost everything yet maintained faith. Ordinary people transformed by extraordinary circumstances, speaking with authority that could only come from having walked through fire and water and emerged purified. These unlikely prophets, school teachers, nurses, construction workers, fishermen, would carry a message uncontaminated by institutional agendas or political calculations. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. I saw a particular woman, elderly and previously overlooked, becoming a spiritual mother to thousands in a massive shelter in the Carolina foothills. A young man of mixed heritage bridging racial divisions in the ruins of coastal Virginia, his words carrying the weight of scripture, though he had never been formally trained. A child prophet in New Jersey, speaking truths that confounded the learned and powerful. Through these and countless others, a message would emerge, not of religious dogma, but of human beings remembering their true identity as creatures made in the divine image, called to stewardship rather than exploitation, to community rather than isolation, to worship rather than self-glorification. The window for this awakening would be brief, perhaps a year, no more than 2, before the pull of old patterns reasserted itself. But those transformed during this season would never return to spiritual slumber. They would become a remnant, a seed, carrying forward a vision of what America could yet become if it embraced the terrible mercy of the waters' judgment. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. As the vision of awakening faded, I felt a profound shift in the quality of Jesus' presence. Without words, I understood my time in this realm was ending. I was being sent back. The knowledge struck me with both grief and terror. Grief at leaving his perfect presence. Terror at the responsibility I would carry. Before I could process these emotions, Jesus placed what I can only describe as his hand upon my heart, though neither hand nor heart existed in physical form. In that touch, a covenant was sealed. I would be his witness. I would speak what I had seen, regardless of the cost. The warning was not mine to keep or discard, but a sacred trust placed within me. In return, I would not be abandoned to this task, but accompanied, though the companionship would often be felt rather than seen. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. The transition back was not gentle. No gradual passage through realms, no peaceful floating downward. Rather, I experienced a violent compression, as if the expanded consciousness I had become was suddenly forced back into a vessel too small to contain it. My lungs burned as they filled with air. My heart thundered painfully in my chest. Every nerve-ending scream with renewed sensation. I heard voices, human voices now, not the perfect communication of the realm I was leaving. Urgent, professional, surprised. He's back. BP stabilizing. Someone get the attending. The fluorescent lights of the Bethesda Naval Hospital trauma room assaulted my eyes. The faces of the medical team came into focus, sweat-streaked, exhausted, astonished. I tried to speak, to tell them what I had seen, but my throat contained only a tube, my arms were restrained, my body a consolation of pain and limitation after the perfect freedom I had known. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Recovery was a kind of exile. 3 days in intensive care, another week in a regular room. The doctors called my return medically remarkable. The cardiac team had been prepared to pronounce me dead after 6 minutes of flatline and failed resuscitation attempts. They attributed my survival to some quirk of physiology, some statistical anomaly. They had no framework for divine intervention, for purposeful return. When I finally could speak, I tried to tell them. First, a night nurse who checked my vitals, then the cardiologist on morning rounds, later the hospital chaplain who stopped by out of routine duty. Each time, I watched the same progression across their faces. Initial curiosity, growing discomfort, eventual dismissal. The nurse patted my hand and adjusted my medication. The doctor reminded me that near-death experiences were common, the brain's response to oxygen deprivation. The chaplain alone showed genuine interest, but even he categorized my experience as symbolic rather than prophetic. The mind often processes spiritual truths through metaphorical imagery, he explained kindly. The tsunami likely represents your fears about mortality, which is perfectly natural after what you've been through. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Upon returning to Seabrook Harbor, I found the skepticism only intensified. My son flew in from Colorado, concerned about my mental state. My daughter arranged for a geriatric psychiatrist to evaluate me. Friends from the college and church visited with casseroles and worried expressions, speaking in hushed tones about post-traumatic stress and cognitive effects of cardiac events. Pastor Williams listened more patiently than most when I finally gathered courage to share the full vision. But even he ultimately suggested that perhaps this was a deeply personal experience meant for my spiritual growth rather than a literal prophetic warning. God speaks to each of us in ways we can understand, he said. Your lifetime by the sea naturally shapes how you perceive spiritual messages. The doubt began to seep into my own mind. Had it been real? Had I imagined a divine commission to justify my survival when others died? Was I attaching cosmic significance to coincidental natural phenomena? Each night, I woke at 3:17 a.m., drenched in sweat, the vision as clear as the moment I experienced it. Each morning, in daylight, surrounded by the normal world, doubts multiplied. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Then came the confirmations, small at first, easily dismissed individually, but accumulating with undeniable weight. A minor earthquake in coastal South Carolina, in an area with no historical seismic activity. A fishing boat captain I'd known for decades described inexplicable changes in deep Atlantic currents. A marine biologist published findings about anomalous temperature patterns along the continental shelf. Most compelling were the dreams. My neighbor's 10-year-old daughter described at breakfast a dream of the ocean folding back like a blanket, then coming back as a mountain. A nursing home resident with dementia, previously nonverbal for months, suddenly began warning staff about the water coming to cleanse. A tourist from Kansas suffered a panic attack on the beach, claiming she had seen the tide recede all the way to tomorrow. As I cautiously began sharing my experience more widely, first with a small prayer group, then in a letter to the local newspaper, finally in a presentation at the community center, the opposition intensified. Anonymous calls in the night, threatening letters. The college where I taught requesting I stop using my former affiliation when speaking publicly. My own church leadership suggesting I take a sabbatical from teaching Sunday school. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. But along with opposition came unexpected allies. A retired NOAA scientist reached out after reading my letter, sharing research too controversial for peer review about tectonic instability in precisely the region I had been shown. A pastor from Virginia Beach described a nearly identical vision received during prayer 3 months earlier. A commercial fisherman showed me journals documenting unprecedented changes in marine behavior patterns. Most remarkably, a woman I'd never met arrived at my door one rainy Tuesday. She had driven from Maryland after seeing my name and town in a dream. "I was told you had been shown what's coming to the coast," she said simply. I was told I would help you spread the warning. As my resolve strengthened, so did the spiritual opposition. Objects in my home moved inexplicably. Electronics malfunctioned whenever I attempted to record my testimony. A dark, oppressive presence sometimes filled my bedroom at night, bringing with it overwhelming fear and doubt. Twice I awoke unable to breathe, as if invisible hands were closing around my throat. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. I understood then what had previously been only theological abstraction, that speaking prophetic truth invites spiritual warfare, that powers and principalities benefit from humanity's spiritual slumber and resist any attempt to awaken souls to eternal realities, that the tsunami itself, though physically real, represented a front in a far larger battle being waged beyond physical perception. This knowledge did not deter me. Having died once, the fear of death no longer held power. Having seen what awaited beyond this life, no earthly opposition could compare to the joy of obedience. Having been trusted with this message, no cost was too great to ensure its delivery. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. And I had made a vow. And so I come to you now, not as scholar or sailor, not as prophet or preacher, but as witness. One who has died, who has seen, who has been sent back with a message that burns in my bones like holy fire. I speak to you directly, urgently, with the authority not of my own wisdom but of what has been revealed. The east coast of the United States faces imminent catastrophe. A tsunami of unprecedented magnitude approaches our shores, not in some distant future, but within a time frame that demands immediate attention. The warning signs have already begun. The unusual seismic activity in South Carolina 3 months ago, the massive, unexplained fish die-off along the Outer Banks last week, the anomalous tidal patterns documented by harbor masters from Maine to Georgia. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. For those living within 20 miles of the Atlantic coast, I implore you, prepare physically while there is still time. Identify evacuation routes that lead inland and to higher elevations. Store emergency supplies, documents, and irreplaceable mementos in go bags ready for immediate departure. Establish meeting points with loved ones. When the waters recede abnormally, far beyond any normal tide, do not delay, do not investigate, do not record a phenomenon for social media. Run, drive, move inland immediately. But physical preparation, while necessary, remains insufficient. What approaches is not merely a natural disaster, but a divine intervention, a terrible mercy extended to a nation that has forgotten its spiritual foundations. The greater preparation must be internal, spiritual, eternal. Return to prayer, not the hurried habitual petitions of busy lives, but the deep communion that transforms the soul. Reconcile broken relationships while there is time. Release bitterness, resentment, unforgiveness. These spiritual anchors will drown you more surely than any physical waters. Rediscover sacred texts, not as historical artifacts or cultural traditions, but as living guidance for souls in desperate times. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Throughout Scripture, we find the pattern repeated. Divine warning before divine intervention. Noah before the flood. Joseph before the famine. Moses before the plagues. Jonah before Nineveh's reckoning. God's nature remains consistent. He warns those he loves, offering opportunity for repentance and preparation before judgment falls. America stands at such a threshold now. The tsunami approaches our physical shores even as a spiritual reckoning approaches our national soul. Yet within this terrible reality lies unprecedented opportunity. The chance for awakening, for remembrance of what we were created to be, individually and collectively. I call you to action, not from fear, but from love, not from speculation, but from revelation. Share this warning without shame or hesitation. Speak to neighbors, family, communities. Use whatever platform you possess, whatever influence you carry. One voice becomes two, becomes thousands, becomes millions. Some will mock, some will dismiss, some will attack. Speak anyway. The waters come regardless of reception, but souls may be saved through your obedience. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. For those who hear this testimony, you're encountering, it is not coincidence but appointment. You have been positioned as watchmen on the wall, as shepherds responsible for your flocks, as witnesses entrusted with truth that may save countless lives, both physical and eternal. The time for comfortable religion has passed. The time for political solutions has passed. The time for academic debate has passed. What remains is the essential calling: to return to the living God with whole hearts, to love neighbors as ourselves in tangible ways, to recognize the spiritual reality behind physical events. If this testimony has moved you, if the Spirit bears witness within you to its truth, I urge you to subscribe to NDE Tales HQ. Share these warnings. Join the community of those who have seen beyond the veil and return with sacred knowledge for such a time as this. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. And now the choice stands before you, as it stood before me in that hospital room when my heart resumed its beating. Will you remain comfortable but complicit in silence? Or will you rise as messenger, as witness, as vessel of both warning and hope? The waters approach. The time is short, but the awakening, if embraced, will endure beyond the catastrophe itself. I stand here now in the gathering twilight, watching the Atlantic waters from my widows walk one last time. The sea that has been my companion for 70 years now speaks with voices few can hear. Each wave that breaks upon our shore carries both warning and promise, both judgment and mercy. In these final moments with you, I offer not just prophecy but perspective, the vision granted only to those who have stood in eternity and returned. Throughout human history, divine warnings have always preceded divine action. The prophets of old were not simply forecasters of doom, but messengers of possibility. Voices crying out from the wilderness of human forgetfulness, calling souls back to their first love, their true purpose. I am no prophet. I am merely a witness, a vessel, a voice. The message is not mine. The timing is not mine. The purpose is far greater than my understanding. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. Beyond the devastation I had described, beyond the wave that will reshape our coastlines and our consciousness, I was shown something that sustains me through mockery and rejection, through loneliness and doubt. I was shown America's potential resurrection. In the communities that will emerge from the waters, I glimpsed the nation we were always meant to be. People valuing relationship above possession, service above status, truth above comfort. Churches awakened from institutional slumber, rediscovering the radical love and transformative power that once turned the world upside down. Leaders emerging not from privilege but from purification, speaking with authority that comes only through suffering transfigured by faith. I saw technology restored to its proper place, as tool rather than master. I saw families gathering without screens, neighbors knowing each other's needs without social media prompts, communities solving problems through presence rather than politics. I saw the rekindling of wonder, children and elders alike standing beneath stars made visible by darkened cities, rediscovering the awe that is the beginning of wisdom. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. This calamity, terrible though it will be, contains within the seeds of America's spiritual restoration, not through external legislation or cultural dominance, but through the inward transformation of individual hearts encountering eternal reality, when all temporal securities are swept away. What remains after such stripping away is what was always most real: love, faith, community, purpose, the sacred worth of each human life. I tell you this not to minimize the coming devastation, but to illuminate its meaning. The tsunami approaches not just as destroyer, but as revealer, exposing what we have built upon sand. Clarify what remains when all else is washed away. Those who hear, who prepare, who respond will become the foundation of what follows. Not just survivors, but revivers, carrying a flame of remembrance into America's next chapter. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. I have fulfilled my vow now. I have testified to what I was shown in those 6 minutes and 17 seconds beyond the veil. Whether you receive or reject this testimony will not change what approaches. The waters gather. The foundations tremble. The appointed time draws near. For those moved by this message, I ask one final thing. Help me extend this warning beyond my limited reach. Subscribe to NDE Tales HQ. Share this testimony. Join your voice with mine and with others who have glimpsed eternity and returned as messengers, not for fame or validation, but because souls hang in a balance. Physical lives and eternal destinies that might be preserved through simple obedience to the call to speak. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. In these closing moments, I challenge you, as I have been challenged, to examine not just your geographical location, but your spiritual position, where you stand in relation to eternal truths. What foundation have you built your life upon? What would remain if all material security were suddenly swept away? These are not abstract theological questions, but urgent practical matters as the waters continue their relentless approach. You who watch this now, you have been chosen to receive this warning for reasons beyond my knowing. Your encounter with this testimony is not random, but appointed. What you do with this knowledge becomes your own sacred responsibility, your own story within a larger narrative unfolding across our nation and our world. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. I return now to my vigil, watching the Atlantic from my perch above Seabrook Harbor. Soon, sooner than most would believe possible, these familiar waters will become the instrument of both judgment and awakening. When that day comes, remember that you were warned not out of cruelty but compassion, not to incite fear but to offer preparation, not to condemn but to redeem. For those with ears to hear and hearts to respond, know this: beyond the wave lies resurrection. Beyond destruction lies renewal. Beyond the death of what we have wrongly treasured lies the rebirth of what we truly need. This is the paradox at the heart of all spiritual truth. That loss becomes gain, that surrender becomes freedom, that death becomes doorway. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things. As darkness falls, and I conclude this testimony, I leave you with the words impressed upon my heart in that realm beyond death, words that sustain me through ridicule and rejection, through loneliness and doubt. I am making all things new, not destroying without purpose, but cleansing for restoration, not ending the story, but turn the page to a chapter yet unwritten. The waters are gathering. The foundations are trembling. The time is shorter than they know. But those who heed the warning may yet find higher ground, not just physically, but spiritually, not just for temporary safety, but for eternal purpose. The waters know our names. The waters remember all things, and they are calling us home.